Hopefully you're having a nice week. Anthony Richardson isn't. He's having a rough week, getting ripped by everybody, and then he gets benched for Joe Flacco for the Sunday night game against the Minnesota Vikings. That news broke yesterday, and I'm assuming, I know there's some ideas out there that this isn't the case, but I'm assuming Joe Flacco is going to be the starter for the rest of the year. Some people don't think that's the case. I don't know. It's just not normal for teams to bench a guy and then bring them back. Okay, Colts aren't going to run Anthony Richardson out there again unless Joe Flacco gets hurt. Just looking at the history, especially the recent history, it's just not what teams do, right? Bryce Young got benched this year. The only reason he played Sunday in Denver was because Sam Darnold got hurt. When Kenny Pickett, when the Steelers were like, this guy's bad, they went to Mitch Trubisky, and then they're like, Mitch Trubisky isn't much better. Mason Rudolph, let's throw you in there. They didn't even go back to Pickett after they realized how bad Mitch Trubisky is. So, those are two of the more recent guys. Kevin Potts, who was on the show earlier, mentioned that I guess Alex Smith, the 49ers did that with him, and the at the time Redskins did that with Rex Grossman. So it's not a normal thing. Is it out of the question? I guess not. I'd just be really surprised if it happened, given the history of how teams operate with their young quarterbacks. Usually when they're benched, they don't play them. Again, with that being said, I fully expect the Colts to trade Anthony Richardson this year during the offseason or next year. Right? Teams just don't go back to quarterbacks that they bench. That's just the reality of it. So they're probably going to move off of Anthony Richardson here at some point, which is annoying. It just is. No way around it. Okay, the Colts knew what they were in for when they drafted Anthony Richardson. They knew exactly what they were signing up for. Raw, potential, needs time to develop. All those things. Jim Irsay said, quote, for Anthony Richardson, it's going to be tough. We know that. But he has to play better. Or he has to play to get better. Excuse me. I mean, there's no question Gardner Minshew could come out and obviously play better early on just being a veteran, but we have to get Anthony on the field. That was Jim Irsay when they drafted Anthony Richardson. Okay, Jim Irsay, the owner and the guy I think behind this, knew what they were signing up for. And he wasn't the only one. Coach Shane Steichen knew what they were signing up for as well. Here's Shane Steichen talking about Anthony Richardson and developing him on the night that he was drafted.
I think the development of players comes with more experience, right? 13 starts. I think when you play more, that's how you develop. You know what I mean? So with him playing and his experience as a player and getting more reps, right? Practice reps, game reps. I think that's how you develop.
That was Colts head coach Shane Steichen talking about developing Anthony Richardson. And he gave those thoughts, I believe, the night that Anthony Richardson was drafted. Okay, obviously Chris Ballard knew what they were signing up for. He's got quotes floating around out there about patience and all those things. And then, the Colts weren't patient at all. Right? And if Chris Ballard didn't know that he was going to have to be this patient when he took Anthony Richardson, then he deserves to be fired. Okay? The sample size is just too small. Anthony Richardson started 10 games in his career. He started and finished 7 of them. He's only attempted 217 passes in his career. That's nothing. That is nothing. Sure, it's looked bad. He was the worst starting quarterback in the NFL. No question about it. Okay, but the Colts are 500 in the games that he started, and they've had a chance to win every single game that they have played. Right? And a large part of that is because the good side of Anthony Richardson and his ability to generate these big explosive plays, either with his arm or with his legs. Okay? So sure, Anthony Richardson struggled a lot. But the reason why the Colts were in a lot of these games is because of Anthony Richardson. And because they're giving up on him so incredibly early, I'm assuming that this is Jim Irsay's doing. Owners are less patient than fans, and I'm assuming that Jim Irsay didn't want to potentially get embarrassed on Sunday Night Football by running out their former number 4 overall pick quarterback to watch him go 10 of 32. Okay? The sample size for Anthony Richardson is just too small. For comparison, Will Levis has thrown almost twice as many passes in 19 games, 19 starts. That is a big enough sample size for the Titans to know whether or not Will Levis is the future of their franchise. It appears that he isn't. He has played almost 3 times the amount of games that Anthony Richardson has. All right, it just feels like the Colts are giving up on Anthony Richardson too early. Bryce Young, same thing. He started he started 16 of 17 games last year for the Panthers, and he started the first 2 games this year for the Panthers. That is a big enough sample size for Carolina to be like, you know what, this guy not very good. Let's move on. The Colts just don't have the sample size to make the proper decision around Anthony Richardson. It would not surprise me in the slightest if the Colts traded him and he became a starting caliber quarterback somewhere else. There's a ton of potential, and we have no idea how close he is to reaching it. We saw him play 4 games last year, or start 4 games last year. We've seen him start 6 games this year. That's it. Okay, and I won't be shocked in the slightest if we look up here in a few years and it's like, oh, he's really good. Who would have thought? And then the Colts' lack of patience is going to kick them in the butt. Very similar to, actually, I wouldn't call it similar because the Rams won a Super Bowl, but you know that there's people in that Rams front office like, geez, like if we'd only waited to see what Jared Goff could become, like our future like would be set, you know. But you know, now Jared Goff's balling out in Detroit, and so you know the impatience on the Colts' part is just. Alarming is not the right word. It's frustrating. That's really what it is. Now, like I said to open the segment, they could go back to him. It is an option. You know, the report was that Joe Flacco was going to start against the Vikings, not Joe Flacco is going to be the starter going forward, which is usually kind of the wording of that. So maybe there's something there for the people out there that are like, they're going to kill Anthony Richardson's confidence. That's just a bunch of hooey. Okay, like if this kills Anthony Richardson's confidence to a point where he doesn't play well, then he was never going to be a starting quarterback in the NFL anyway. Too fragile from that perspective, okay? So maybe this is just a wake-up call. We'll see. As of right now, though, they're going to Flacco. I'm assuming he's going to be the starter the rest of the year because that's what we've seen from NFL teams throughout the history of the league. And, you know, like he's been good. 7 touchdowns, only 1 interception, completing 66% of his passes with the yards per attempt of 6.6. He's very average. Okay, I know that he took the Browns to the playoffs last year, but when he took over for the Browns were 7-3. Okay, he didn't have to do too much there. Okay, he played well. You know, that defense I think really kind of carried the load for Cleveland, given the number of interceptions that he threw. Once again, he is very, very average. He raises the floor of this Colts team. Okay, he is better than Anthony Richardson is right now. There's no doubt about that. But there's also no future with him. He'll be 40 in January. He doesn't have all that much left in the tank, and it doesn't make any sort of sense for the Colts to sacrifice playing a quarterback who could potentially be their long-term solution at the most important position in the NFL to play a 39-year-old quarterback that's going to get you to 9-8 or 7 or 10-7. Okay, and then after that, you're probably going to lose in the first round to the Bills, Ravens, or Chiefs. Like this Colts defense isn't good, and their quarterback is average, and that's not exactly a winning combination that leads to deep playoff runs. Usually teams with bad defenses and average quarterbacks don't make the playoffs. Okay, my biggest issue with how this is being covered and how people are talking about this Colts team now that Joe Flacco is the starter is that it's just like, oh, like they're a playoff team now. And that's just not true. You know, Kirk Herbstreit, he had that clip during the Bengals game where he called this Colts roster a playoff roster. And that's just simply not true. It's not true. Because the Colts have done this before. They've taken the journeyman quarterback, inserted him in with this exact same roster, because it's been the same roster for the last 5 years, and they haven't made the playoffs last year. They bring in Gardner Minshew, journeyman quarterback. They go 9-8, and they miss the playoffs. 2022, they bring in Matt Ryan. They go 4-12-1, and they missed the playoffs. 2021, they bring in Carson Wentz. They go 9-8, and they missed The playoffs, 2020, they bring in Phillip Rivers, right? They go 11-5. Yay. And then they lose in the wild card round to the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen. 2019, they bring in Jacoby Brissett. They go 7-9, and they didn't make the playoffs. 2018 was the last time they won a playoff game. That was Andrew Luck's last year. Okay, for the last 5 years, it's been basically the same roster with a different quarterback at each and every single stop. The only time they made the playoffs and won a playoff game was when they had an awesome quarterback in Andrew Luck. Okay, it's almost like quarterbacks really matter. And if you have an average one in the playoffs, you aren't going to win. It's that simple, especially when the rest of your roster is inferior, like the Colts is compared to the Chiefs, Ravens, and Bills. Okay, this Joe Flacco move does absolutely nothing for the Indianapolis Colts. All it does is restart the cycle of journeyman quarterbacks coming to Indianapolis and going 500.